Thank you. The gentleman yields back. I'll begin our questions today, followed by the ranking member. We'll then alternate between parties. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for the purpose of asking our witnesses questions. Mr. Christian Adams, I want to start with you. Federal law makes it a felony for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. Is that correct?
It is.
And federal law also makes it a felony to submit a voter form with false info like citizenship, correct?
Correct.
But under the NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, states are required to provide voter registration materials at various state offices, including those providing public assistance, right?
Yes, it has one, but it's limited the burden on the states. But
okay, so how does the NVRA deal with the situation when non-citizens receive public benefits like driver's licenses? Do they get voter registration materials?
Well, some states have started to cram in voter registration materials with those public benefit applications, which are going to citizens and non-citizens alike.
Okay, so with that background, then the situation in Pennsylvania, what did your organization learn about the voter rolls when you brought the lawsuit in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, this is a disaster, what happened in Pennsylvania, that has not gotten enough attention. Steve Dinan at the Washington Times has written about it. Pennsylvania was registering non-citizens for 20 years, and they admit it. This is not subject to debate. And the question is, was it 10,000 or 100,000?
And so that needs to be fixed immediately in Pennsylvania, correct?
Well, we're suing to see what they did to fix it, and we're in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. We've already won summary judgment to get the records of the fix, but Pennsylvania's playing keep away.
Thank you for that. Let me shift to you, Mr. Hans von Spakovsky, if I can. Ohio recently announced that they did a review and found 100 non-citizens on their voter rolls. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And so then sticking with the topic of non-citizen voting, isn't it true that this November, non-citizens that reside in D.C. for simply 30 days can vote in D.C. municipal elections?
That's correct.
And D.C. also mails every registered voter a ballot, correct?
Correct.
And so you're telling me that in Washington, D.C., if there is even a small clerical mistake, non-citizens could be mailed a ballot with federal races on them?
That's correct.
But we've heard and we know it's a felony for non-citizens to vote in federal races, but the D.C. Board of Elections held a call a few weeks ago encouraging non-citizens to vote in the municipal elections and told the public it was on the non-citizen to understand they can't vote in the federal election, correct?
That's correct.
And so then I want to go back because we heard from one of our other witnesses that non-citizen voting is a myth, that there's no evidence of this. But was there a case where there was a close election in the House of Representatives and Congress went back and studied whether or not non-citizens actually partook in that election or not?
There was, and in fact, I brought the report. This is the House Oversight Committee report from 1998, and it was the investigation of the race between Bob Dorn and Loretta Sanchez. Margin of victory, 979 votes. Because the INS refused to give the committee records, they had to subpoena them. And when they compared the INS records to the Orange County Register, they found clear and convincing evidence that 624 aliens had registered and voted. They found circumstantial evidence of 196 aliens who'd registered and voted. That's 820.
What did they have to do to be able to cross-check that?
They had to take the INS records and check it against the voter registration records.
Is this done in every election?
No, it's not.
Well, we were told there was a paper trail. We were told there by another witness that there was a paper trail. You're telling me that this paper trail only came because Congress subpoenaed the records in this case.
That's exactly right, and that's why, as Secretary Byrd said, Secretary of State need to be given access to DHS records.
So Secretary Byrd, if you were concerned, you run solid elections in the state of Florida, but if you were concerned that this was taking place, would you have the access that Congress had in the review of the 1998 election?
We do not have that access in a timely and efficient manner.
Would you like the access to that?
Absolutely.
It would make total sense to be able, we were told that there's a paper trail to allow you to go and to review whether or not this is taking place, because as Hans von Spakovsky just said, that in the case where it was reviewed, over 600 individuals were found to be non-citizens who voted in that election. Is that correct? I'll come back to you, Hans von Spakovsky, on that.
It is, and it's against the law. I'm not aware that the U.S. Department of Justice investigated or prosecuted a single one of those aliens who voted. And I have personal experience with this also. I was on the Fairfax County Board of Elections, and in 2011, I asked the General Registrar, do you all check the DMV records to see whether individuals who show up to get a driver's license, you know, here legally, but they're aliens, do you check to see whether they've registered to vote? And he said, well, no, we don't do that. I said, you need to do that. So they checked. They found 278 individuals. This is just one county in Virginia who were aliens. They investigated. They confirmed they were aliens. 117 of them had voted in prior elections. We took the 278 off the rolls, forwarded it to both the local Commonwealth attorney, because it's against the law in Virginia. He did nothing about it.
So the way that you're describing this sounds a lot like, to me, that somebody's saying that there's nobody speeding on the interstate. And I would say, well, how do you know that? And it's, well, it's very clear. The speed limit's 70 miles per hour. So we know no one is going over 70 miles an hour. And the evidence of that is there's no speeding tickets that have ever been issued.
No,
Where if you actually went and reviewed this, as was done in this case, what we found was this is an actual and substantive problem, exacerbated by the fact that places like Washington, D.C. are allowing non-citizens to vote in municipal elections, don't have proper controls to prevent them from voting in federal elections. And then as we look, a staffer on my committee walked by this ballot box in Washington, D.C., unlocked, unsecured. Does this increase confidence in elections, in your opinion, Mr. Von Swigowski?
No, it implements a huge risk that something could happen to those ballots. It could be stuffed with ballots. Ballots could be stolen. I mean,
So if Washington, D.C. Board of Elections, if this is how they're operating their ballot box collection, less than 1 mile from where we sit right here, it gives me great pause that there's not any clerical errors occurring as to when they have non-citizens on the voter rolls in Washington, D.C. being in a position to vote for federal elections. That should cause grave concern, which is why non-citizens shouldn't be voting in our elections, period. And it shows from the evidence here is exactly why we should actually be reviewing and enforcing the law as it relates to non-citizens voting in our federal elections. Let me shift gears before I'm done quickly to you, Ms. Sutherland, on a slightly different topic about foreign funds in U.S. elections. So today, under current law, can foreign nationals pay for activities like voter registration, ballot harvesting, and get out the vote activities?
Yes.
That's really concerning. We already saw the massive problems associated with Zuckerbucks in the 2020 election. We've held hearings on it here and flushed out those concerns. Congress needs to close that loophole. Now, doesn't federal law generally prohibit foreign nationals from directly or indirectly spending money in U.S. elections?
That's correct.
But as your organization's documented, foreign nationals are using nonprofits as a pass-through to give to often Democratic super PACs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you explain that problem briefly?
Absolutely. So foreign nationals are prohibited from contributing to super PACs directly, but there's nothing prohibiting a foreign national from contributing to a 501c4 that then turns around and gives to a super PAC. In fact, in 2020, we saw that the 1630 fund that received tens of millions of dollars from a foreign national turned around and contributed $60 million to pro-Biden super PACs.
Exactly the problem. When we had the FEC commissioners in here, Democrats and Republicans alike all agreed that we should close that loophole. I've introduced legislation to do just that, preventing foreign interference in Americans' Elections Act. I would love to see a full vote in favor by all 12 members of this committee. I think it's essential, as we're looking at foreign interference in our elections, that we come together to close that loophole that you just identified, that every FEC commissioner that testified before us said should also be closed. This should be a no-brainer, and I hope to have that done before this November's election. I thank all of you for being here today. I yield back, and I'll now recognize the ranking